The world we call Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance, was a land of powerful paradox. It possessed the ancient history of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, yet had fallen into complete spiritual darkness. The Arabs were masters of poetry and trade, yet they were slaves to revenge, tribalism, and injustice. We have seen the wars, the pride, and the self-sufficiency of Makkah's elite. But underneath that exterior, the people were suffering. The land was not thriving. It was exhausted. It was crying out for a moral guide, a unifying force, a messenger to bring light to the chaos. This is the story of that decay, the pain that preceded the cure, and how the stage was set for the greatest event in human history. The most visible sign of moral decay was the vast chasm between the wealthy elite of the Quraysh and the vulnerable, the poor, the orphans, and the slaves. Social injustice was rampant, not as an exception, but as the rule. If you lacked a powerful tribe to protect you, you had no rights, no recourse, and often no hope. The ruling class lived in luxury, while those around them starved. Tribal favoritism meant that justice was bought with blood, not with truth. The system was designed to keep the powerful safe and the weak utterly defenseless. The greatest indictment of the age of ignorance comes directly from the Quran. The people of Makkah had become so hard-hearted that they failed the most basic moral test, caring for the innocent. We hear the condemnation in Surah Al-Ma'un. Have you seen the one who denies the recompense? For that is the one who drives away the orphan and does not encourage the feeding of the poor. This wasn't just neglect, it was active expulsion and disregard. The lack of charity, the failure to protect the orphan, and the refusal to feed the poor were spiritual diseases. It showed a complete detachment from the idea of accountability to a higher power. To understand the complete lack of moral law, we must turn to a true incident from the Seerah, Prophet's biography. A trader from the tribe of Zubayd came to Makkah to sell his goods. A powerful man from the Quraysh, historians note it was Al-As ibn Wa'il, bought the goods but flatly refused to pay the man. The Zubaydi trader had no tribe in Makkah to defend him, no court to appeal to. He was powerless. Desperate, he climbed up a hill and cried out, appealing to the moral sense of the Makkah leaders gathered near the Kaaba. Did any of the Quraysh elite stand up for him? No. They simply mocked him and laughed at his misfortune, viewing his misfortune as their own entitlement. This was not merely theft, it was the institutionalization of oppression. The very people sworn to protect the Kaaba were the ones licensing the corruption of the marketplace. This incident was so shameful that it later spurred a small, noble group of righteous Makkans to form the Hilf al-Fudul, Pact of the Virtuous, an attempt by a few good men to impose justice where the system had failed. The fact that the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, himself later praised and joined. This pact shows how deeply he recognized the need for a just code. But before Islam, this pact was a silent, desperate acknowledgement. Makkah's governing law was utterly broken, and the cries of the defenseless were falling on deaf ears. The city of God's house had become a den of thieves. The spiritual sickness was epitomized by the state of the Kaaba. Built for the worship of Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God, it had been corrupted by 360 tribal idols. This wasn't genuine faith, it was a fragmented mix of superstition, fear, and tribal politics. Each idol promised a local form of protection or luck, stripping the people of a universal, unifying truth. They worshipped objects of their own making, a tragic symbol of their profound spiritual void. This fear-based polytheism replaced reasoned faith and morality, leaving their hearts empty and grasping. In the economic sphere, Makkah's wealth was its moral downfall. The engine of their commerce was usury, Riba. Money was lent at exorbitant interest, systematically indebting the poor to the rich. The powerful grew richer by exploiting the desperation of the needy. This economic practice was a tool of sustained oppression, ensuring that money and power always flowed into the hands of a few established families. This system was unjust, unsustainable, and devoid of the concept of economic charity. Despite Makkah's commercial success, the core of society remained dictated by the tribal code. This was a system where honor demanded revenge, leading to endless blood feuds. Loyalty was strictly to one's bloodline, not to truth or justice. The society was incapable of establishing a lasting peace or a unified legal system because every conflict simply led to another, perpetuating the cycle of violence. The most famous example is the War of Fijar, the sacrilegious wars. Fought over simple slights related to trade and tribal honor, these wars were considered so terrible that they raged intermittently for 4 years, even violating the sacred months when fighting was strictly forbidden by Arabian custom. The Quraysh and their allies fought the Hawazin tribe, resulting in massive loss of life and property across the peninsula. The lesson from the War of Fijar was devastatingly clear. Man, guided purely by his own pride and tribal loyalty, is incapable of true peace. This cycle of violence showed that the greatest power in Arabia, tribal pride, was also its greatest weakness. The only solution could not be another treaty between tribes. It had to be a law that transcended all tribes, a universal guidance that demanded forgiveness over vengeance and justice over blood ties. Without divine intervention, Arabia was destined to consume itself in endless, futile warfare. Poetry and oral tradition were central to pre-Islamic culture. Poets were heroes. They were the moral guides and the record keepers. However, much of the most celebrated poetry glorified tribal pride, revenge, lineage, and temporary pleasures. It reinforced the chaos of the tribal code rather than offering universal ethical truth. The culture celebrated arrogance over humility and vengeance over forgiveness. Their entertainment lacked moral education, deepening the social and spiritual divide. Not everyone in Arabia was lost. A small, scattered group known as the Hanifs rejected the idol worship and the moral decay. Guided by a pure intellect and heart, they sought the original, pure monotheism of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. They had no books, no community, and no defined path, but their search was a powerful sign. It proved that the human spirit was indeed ready for guidance. Their very existence showed a spiritual vacuum, waiting to be filled by divine revelation. The accumulated decay, the economic exploitation, the spiritual fragmentation, the tribal violence, and the injustice to the weak had led Arabia to a societal dead end. The old solutions had failed. Wealth couldn't buy peace, and the idols couldn't grant certainty. The people were desperate, whether they realized it or not. The land was ready to collapse under the weight of its own moral contradictions. The stage was not just set, it was pleading for a change, for a universal messenger who could unite the people under a single, just, and perfect law. The dark night of Jahiliyyah was about to end. The spiritual, moral, and social chaos had reached its zenith, creating the perfect environment for the ultimate intervention. In this world of injustice and spiritual hunger, one man had been quietly prepared for this very moment. He was known throughout Makkah not for his wealth or his tribe, but for his impeccable character. He was Al-Amin, the trustworthy. His time had come. Next, in Part 10, we will witness the event that shattered the darkness, the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him.